The roar of the crowd was a familiar ocean, rising and falling with Elvis Presley's every gesture. On stage, bathed in the blinding glare of the spotlights, he was still the king, the magnetic force that had captivated millions for 2 decades. His sequin jumpsuit shimmered. His voice, though showing the strain of endless performances, still held that raw, undeniable power. Yet, if you looked closely past the dazzling smile and the sweat beading on his brow, something haunted his eyes. Profound weariness, a deep-seated ache that no amount of applause could ever truly soothe. It was 1976, and the grind of Las Vegas, the endless touring, the demands of being Elvis were taking their toll. Backstage, the energy that fueled his performance drained away, leaving him hollowed out. His aides hovered, offering towels, water, anything to ease his transition from idol to man. But no one could touch the solitude that settled around him like a cloak. Tonight, after the final encore, as the last echoes of "Can't Help Falling in Love" faded, Elvis felt it more acutely than usual. He stumbled slightly as he walked off stage, the weight of the suit, the weight of the world, heavy on his shoulders. Vernon, his father, was there, his face etched with worry. Even Vernon, who knew him better than anyone, couldn't fully comprehend the secret burden Elvis carried. In his dressing room, the mirrors reflected a man who looked older than his 41 years. He peeled off the heavy rhinestone-studded costume, each button, each clasp, a symbol of the persona he had to maintain. As he unzipped the last zipper, a small, worn leather locket, usually tucked beneath his shirt, swung free. He caught it in his hand, his thumb tracing the faded initials engraved on its surface. E.B. His gaze softened, the harsh lines around his mouth relaxing into a tenderness rarely seen by outsiders. He opened the locket. Inside, 2 miniature photographs blurred with time stared back. One was of a young woman, her smile gentle, her eyes filled with a quiet strength. The other, impossibly, was of a baby, tiny and swaddled with a shock of dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages, even in infancy. A long, shuddering sigh escaped his lips. The scent of stale cigarette smoke and cheap perfume still clung to the air. But in his mind it was replaced by the clean, crisp smell of pine trees and the faint, sweet scent of wild flowers. The cacophony of the casino floor outside, usually a dull roar, now sounded impossibly distant, drowned out by the whisper of a memory. He closed his eyes, gripping the locket tightly. The pain wasn't a sudden, sharp stab. It was a dull, constant ache, like an old wound that never truly healed. It was the ache of a love lost, a life not lived, a path not taken. It was the pain of a secret so profound, so deeply buried, that even his closest confidants had no idea it existed. This wasn't about fame, or money, or even Priscilla. It was about something far more fundamental, something that had shaped the very core of his being, casting a long, bittersweet shadow over his life. It was a memory that bloomed in the quiet hours when the crowds were gone and the spotlights dimmed. A memory that held both his greatest joy and his deepest sorrow. He remembered her smile, the way her hand felt in his, the shared laughter in places far from the flashing cameras. He remembered the impossible choice they had faced, a choice made out of love, but one that had splintered his heart into 1,000 pieces. He looked at the baby's photo again, his eyes welling up. This was the secret. This was the reason for the pain. This was the silent, invisible anchor that kept him tethered to a dream that could never be. And as he finally allowed himself to shed a tear in the privacy of his dressing room, the world outside continued to believe the king was simply tired, unaware of the profound truth hidden behind his weary, beautiful eyes. The year was 1961. Elvis, already a legend, felt the constant pressure of Hollywood and the music industry pressing in on him. After finishing filming for Blue Hawaii, a picture that had been as much a vacation as a job, he craved a different kind of escape. Not the usual whirlwind trip to Graceland, but somewhere quiet, anonymous, where the only voices he heard were his own thoughts, not the clamor of fans or the demands of Colonel Parker. He found it in a small, unassuming town, nestled deep in the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina. It wasn't advertised as a celebrity retreat. It was simply a place with a quiet lake, fishing and hiking trails. Using an alias and dressed in simple clothes, Elvis hoped to blend in. For a few precious weeks, he wanted to be just a man, not the king. One afternoon, seeking refuge from a sudden summer shower, he ducked into a small, dusty antique shop. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and forgotten stories. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, just a moment of peace. That's when he saw her. She was standing by a sun-drenched window, meticulously dusting a collection of delicate porcelain figures. Her hair, the color of warm honey, was pulled back in a loose braid, and a few strands had escaped to frame a face that was more interesting than conventionally beautiful. Her eyes, the color of moss after a rain, held an intelligent spark. She wore a simple, practical dress splattered with what looked like paint. She glanced up as he entered, and for a split second he braced himself for the inevitable gasp, the recognition, the request for an autograph. But it didn't come. She simply offered a polite, gentle smile. "Welcome," she said, her voice soft with a melodic lilt he couldn't quite place. "Feel free to browse. I'm Eleanor Vance." Elvis, thrown off guard by her lack of fanfare, found himself smiling genuinely for the first time in days. "Thanks," he mumbled, a little awkwardly. He introduced himself as Eli, a name he often used when trying to fly under the radar. Eleanor merely nodded, returning to her dusting. There was no flicker of suspicion, no hint of recognition. She treated him like any other customer, which was precisely what he craved. He found himself drawn to her quiet competence, her unhurried grace. He spent the next hour meandering through the shop, pretending to look at items, but mostly just observing her. She seemed to live in her own world, a world of beautiful old things and quiet contemplation. He learned in snippets of conversation that she painted in her spare time, that the shop belonged to her aunted, and that she loved the quiet solitude of the mountains. She was entirely unimpressed by any flashy or grand. As the rain subsided, he bought a small chipped ceramic bird. Not because he particularly wanted it, but because it gave him an excuse to talk to her a little longer. As she wrapped it carefully, she looked up at him, her eyes thoughtful. "You seem a little out of place here," she observed kindly. "You have the look of someone who carries a lot on his shoulders." Elvis laughed, a genuine, heartfelt sound. "Maybe I do," he admitted. "It's nice to be somewhere where nobody knows that." Eleanor smiled, a knowing glint in her eye. "Everyone has their burdens, Eli. The mountains don't judge." He left the shop feeling lighter than he had in years. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had stumbled upon something extraordinary. The next day he found himself back at the antique shop, this time with no pretense of shopping. He just wanted to talk to Eleanor Vance. And she surprisingly seemed equally pleased to see him. In a world full of noise, she offered him silence, understanding, and a connection that felt profoundly, wonderfully real. He was Elvis Presley, the biggest star in the world, and she treated him like a quiet stranger who just happened to share a love for old stories and quiet moments. It was the most refreshing thing that had ever happened to him. Their connection deepened quickly, blossoming in the quiet corners of that mountain town. For Elvis, it was a revelation. He was used to being adored, worshipped even. But Eleanor Vance didn't see Elvis Presley, the icon. She saw Eli, the thoughtful, sometimes melancholic man who loved to strum his guitar by the lake and talk for hours about things that truly mattered: art, nature, the fleeting beauty of life. He learned she was an aspiring artist, finding inspiration in the rugged beauty of the Appalachians. Her canvases were filled with vibrant landscapes and soulful portraits. She was fiercely independent, content with her simple life, and possessed a wisdom that belied her years. She challenged him, not with demands for attention or gifts, but with questions that made him think, that peeled back the layers of his famous persona. Their dates were unlike anything he'd ever experienced. No flashy restaurants. Instead, they hiked hidden trails, picnicked by waterfalls, and spent evenings on her aunt's porch, listening to the crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. She taught him about local wildflowers, and he, in turn, shared stories about his childhood in Tupelo. Stories he hadn't told anyone outside his family in years. He'd even sung for her, just for her sitting on a rock by the lake, his voice raw and pure, unburdened by microphones or grand orchestration. Her reaction wasn't a scream or a swoon, but a quiet, appreciative nod, her eyes moist. "You sing with your soul, Eli," she'd whispered. "Don't ever lose that." He fell in love with her slowly, irrevocably, with the quiet certainty of the rising sun. It wasn't the passionate, fiery romance he'd known with other women. It was a deep, abiding affection, a sense of coming home. With Eleanor, he felt truly seen, truly understood, in a way he hadn't since his mother Gladys passed away. She was his secret garden, a refuge from the chaotic demands of his public life. The danger of discovery loomed. Of course, he knew he couldn't stay hidden forever. Colonel Parker, his shrewd manager, would eventually track him down, furious at his unauthorized absence. But for now, he clung to every stolen moment, every shared laugh, every silent glance. One evening, as they sat by a bonfire, the stars blazing overhead like scattered diamonds, Eleanor leaned her head on his shoulder. "What will happen when you leave, Eli?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "This can't last." He pulled her closer, reading in the scent of her hair. Pine, and something uniquely her. "I don't want to leave, Eleanor," he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. "I've never felt this way about anyone. You make me feel normal, like myself." She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "You're not normal, Eli," she said, gently touching his cheek. "You're extraordinary, and your world. It's just so different from mine. I don't think I could ever belong in it." His heart ached at her words, knowing she was right. His life was a circus, a relentless whirlwind of performances, films, and public appearances. Her life was quiet, anchored in simplicity and artistic expression. He couldn't imagine her tolerating the paparazzi, the constant scrutiny, the endless travel, and yet he couldn't imagine a future without her either. "What if we found a way?" he murmured, a desperate hope fluttering in his chest. "What if we tried?" Eleanor was silent for a long moment. Then she sighed. "We can try, Eli," she said, her voice full of a bittersweet tenderness. "But we have to be honest with each other about what that might mean." He knew then that their love story, however beautiful, was fraught with an almost impossible challenge. But looking into her sincere, loving eyes, he knew he had to try. He couldn't go back to the emptiness he'd felt before her. She was a revelation, a beacon, and he would do anything to keep her light in his life, even if it meant navigating a path no one else could possibly understand. He kissed her under the silent, watchful stars, a silent promise hanging in the cool mountain air. Their secret garden was blooming, but its delicate petals were vulnerable to the harsh winds of his celebrity world. The idyll couldn't last forever. Colonel Parker, with his network of spies and his uncanny ability to track Elvis down, eventually found him. The phone call, when it came, was a jarring intrusion into their peaceful bubble. Parker's voice, usually jovial, was now clipped and stern. "Elvis boy, what in tarnation are you doing? Hiding out in the sticks? We got commitments. Tours, films. The world doesn't stop just because you fancy a little vacation." Elvis tried to explain, tried to convey the profound impact Eleanor had made on him, but Parker, ever the pragmatist, wasn't interested in emotions. He only understood contracts and dollar signs. Love is for song lyrics, son, not for derailing a career. Get back here now. Reluctantly, Elvis knew he had to go. His responsibilities were immense, his convicts. But he refused to leave Eleanor without a plan, without a promise. He brought her back to Graceland, secretly, of course. He wanted her to see his world, to understand the pressures, but also to see the genuine love and warmth of his family. Eleanor was gracious, handling the strangeness of Graceland with quiet dignity. She admired the house, appreciated Vernon's hospitality, and even managed to charm some of Elvis's more intimidating entourage members. But her eyes, though kind, also held a flicker of apprehension. She saw the constant stream of phone calls, the bodyguards, the fans camped outside the gates, the ever-present shadow of Colonel Parker. "It's like living in a gilded cage, Eli," she whispered to him one night, as they sat in a quiet corner of the house, away from the watchful eyes. "Beautiful, yes, but a cage nonetheless." "I can protect you from it," he insisted, holding her hand tightly. "I can find a way to make it work. We'll have our own space, our own time." He imagined buying a secluded ranch, creating a sanctuary where they could be themselves. He truly believed he could bend his world to accommodate her, or carve out a new one just for them. But Eleanor, with her clear-eyed practicality, saw the immense difficulty of such an arrangement. Their conversations became a dance of love and pragmatism. He spoke of marriage, of a future together. She loved him, he knew that. Her eyes softened whenever he spoke. Her hand instinctively found his, but her love was tempered by a fierce self-awareness and a desire to remain true to herself. She saw the price of fame, not just for him, but for those around him. She saw the loneliness in his eyes, even amidst the adoration. "What if we tried to live a normal life for a while, Eli?" she proposed one day. "Just you and me. No cameras, no managers. See if it's truly possible." He knew that was impossible. His schedule was relentless, his obligations immense. Colonel Parker wouldn't allow it. The machine wouldn't stop. He was trapped, and by loving him she would be trapped too. The unspoken truth hung between them. Their worlds were fundamentally incompatible. His was a supernova, hers a quiet, steady flame. He needed her peace, her grounding presence. She cherished her anonymity. He couldn't imagine asking her to sacrifice everything she was for his chaotic life. And she, in turn, couldn't ask him to give up the legacy he was building, the music that moved millions. One poignant evening, as they walked in the Graceland Gardens, the silence between them spoke volumes. "I love you, Eleanor," he said, his voice raw. "More than anything. And I love you, Eli," she replied, her eyes shimmering. "That's why this is so hard. I don't want to be the reason you lose yourself or your music, and I can't lose myself either." They both understood that their love, though powerful, might not be enough to bridge the chasm between their lives. The path ahead seemed impossibly steep, filled with compromises neither of them truly wanted to make. The secret garden they had cultivated was beautiful, but the walls of his fame pressed in, threatening to suffocate its delicate blossoms. The news came quietly, delivered not in a dramatic phone call, but in a letter handwritten on simple stationery. Elvis was on tour, caught in the relentless cycle of hotels, performances, and late-night calls. He ripped open the envelope, recognizing Eleanor's elegant script. His heart leaped with a familiar surge of hope, a desperate wish that she had found a way for them. But as he read the words, blurred then solidified into an impossible truth, she was pregnant. He sat on the edge of his hotel bed, the letter trembling in his hand. A rush of conflicting emotions washed over him. Shock, then an overwhelming wave of pure, unadulterated joy. A baby, their baby. Tiny piece of their secret garden blooming in the most unexpected way. He imagined a child with Eleanor's serene eyes and his own passion. A blend of their souls, the thought was intoxicating. Then the crushing weight of reality descended. His life was a public spectacle. He was Elvis Presley, married to his career, constantly under scrutiny. His marriage to Priscilla was still years away, but even then, his managers and the media would never accept a secret child, especially not with a woman from outside his carefully curated image. Colonel Parker would erupt, threatening lawsuits, scandals, the destruction of everything he had built. He called Eleanor immediately, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Eleanor, is it true?" "Yes, Eli," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I'm sure I didn't know how to tell you what to do." "We'll figure it out," he vowed. though panic was starting to bubble beneath his joyous facade. "We'll get married. We'll find a place away from all of this. We'll protect our child." But Eleanor, ever the realist, sighed. "Eli, listen to me. I thought about this deeply. Our child deserves a normal life, a life without constant cameras, without bodyguards, without the world dissecting their every move. They deserve a quiet childhood, the kind we had." He knew she was right. He had seen the toll fame took on him, on his family. He often wished for a simpler life himself. The thought of not being a father to his own flesh and blood, of not raising this child with Eleanor, tore him apart. "But I want to be there," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "I want to be a father, our child. They deserve to know their father." "And they will in their own way," Eleanor said, her voice filled with a heartbreaking resolve. "But not publicly, not with the world watching, not with the shadow of Elvis Presley looming over them. I can't put a child through that. Not when there's another path." She laid out her plan, a plan she had clearly agonized over. She would move far away from her current town to a place where no one knew her. She would raise the child quietly away from the spotlight. She had a trusted cousin, Mary, who lived in a remote part of Oregon, who had promised to help her. This cousin would be the only one who knew the truth. "'Twill be my secret, Eli," she explained, her voice trembling slightly now, "and yours for the child's sake." He listened, his heart slowly breaking. He raged, he pleaded, he offered every solution he could imagine. He would buy them a house, send money, visit in disguise. But Eleanor was unwavering. She was thinking of the child, not their own desires. She wanted peace and anonymity for their baby, something she knew his world could never offer. "I love you, Eli," she whispered, her voice choked with tears. "And I know you love me, and I know you'll love this child. That's why I need you to agree to this. It's the only way to give them a truly free life." The silence on the line was deafening. He envisioned his life without them, a hollow existence filled with the roar of crowds but no true joy. He thought of his childhood, the simple joys, the freedom. He knew she was right. He couldn't condemn his child to the life he had. The decision, though hers, required his unbearable sacrifice. Finally, with tears streaming down his face, he choked out, "Okay, Eleanor, for our child, for their future. But promise me, you'll keep me informed, promise me." "I'll know. I promise, Eli," she sobbed. "Always, they will always know about their father in time and in our own way. And I will send you updates through a trusted friend of mine once they are born. It will be discreet, always." He hung up the phone, feeling heavy and cold in his hand. The joy of a moment ago had been replaced by a profound, agonizing grief. He was going to be a father, but he would never truly be a public one. His child would be born into a secret, and he would carry that secret and the pain of that sacrifice for the rest of his life. The months that followed Eleanor's revelation were the longest, most agonizing of Elvis's life. He tried to focus on his work, on his music, but a part of him was always elsewhere, picturing Eleanor, wondering how she was doing, counting down the days until their child would arrive. Colonel Parker continued to schedule him relentlessly, pulling him further into the public eye, even as his private world was crumbling. Eleanor, true to her word, had vanished. She wrote to him only through the intermediary Mary, her trusted cousin, who now served as her confidant and the keeper of their secret. The letters were brief, coded messages of well-being, little details about her new, quiet life in a small, remote community nestled in the mountains of Oregon. She described the fresh air, the towering fir trees, the feeling of peace she was finding there. She didn't dwell on her pregnancy, but he could read between the lines, sensing her quiet determination and fierce protectiveness. The day came eventually. A short, almost cryptic telegram arrived at Graceland, delivered directly to Elvis's personal aide, Joe Esposito, whom he had trusted with Eleanor's contact information and the discreet handling of the secret communication. Joe ever loyal, understood the gravity of the messages, though he didn't know the full story. Telegram simply read, "Pine cone safely landed. 7L doing well. Details to follow." L, a boy, he knew it in his heart. Leo. He had suggested the name during one of their last tearful phone calls. Eleanor had liked it. Leo. A king, a lion. A fitting name for their secret son. Elvis locked himself in his room, the news hitting him with a tidal wave of conflicting emotions, overwhelming joy that his child was safe, healthy, an agonizing ache that he couldn't be there, couldn't hold his newborn son, couldn't share this monumental moment with the woman he loved. He paced, he cried, he clutched Eleanor's locket to his chest. He imagined the scene in that remote Oregon home. Eleanor, tired but radiant, holding their baby. He imagined the child's tiny fingers, the softness of their skin, the scent of new life. A few weeks later, a package arrived, also via Mary and Joe. Inside, wrapped in a simple cloth, was a small, crudely drawn picture of a tree and a tiny knitted booty. And then a photograph. It was the photo he now carried in his locket. A tiny baby swaddled with dark hair and eyes that seemed to gaze right into his soul. His son touched the photograph, his fingers tracing the outline of Leo's tiny face. He saw Eleanor in the set of the mouth, the curve of the forehead. He saw himself in the dark hair, the intensity of the gaze. A wave of love so profound it was almost painful washed over him. This was real. This was his son. The secret life of Eleanor and Leo continued, shielded from the relentless glare of his fame. He knew through Mary's occasional carefully worded letters that Leo was thriving. He was a curious, energetic boy who loved to draw and spend time outdoors. Mary would sometimes include a tiny sketch Leo had made or a pressed leaf he had collected. These small tokens were Elvis's lifeline, his connection to the son he couldn't publicly claim. Meanwhile, his public life went on louder and more demanding than ever. He married Priscilla. Lisa Marie was born a bright, beautiful ray of sunshine in his life. He adored her, cherished her, and poured all his visible fatherly love into her. But beneath it all, the memory of Leo, the invisible child, remained. He'd spend hours alone in the music room at Graceland, strumming his guitar. The melodies, often turning melancholic, filled with an unspoken longing. He'd sing lullabies, his voice low and tender, imagining Leo sleeping peacefully, miles and worlds away. Pain was always there, a dull ache behind his smile, a shadow in his eyes. It was the constant reminder of the choice that had been made, the sacrifice for the child's sake. Eleanor had made the courageous choice, the one that broke his heart, but also filled it with an endless well of love and admiration for her. She had chosen anonymity, for their son, a life free from the suffocating burden of his fame. And he, Elvis, the king, could only honor that choice, carrying their secret with the quiet dignity of a man who loved his child more than his own public image, more than anything in the world. Years bled into each other, a kaleidoscope of gold, lame flashing lights, and the ever-present hum of fame. Elvis was the king, but increasingly the crown felt heavy. His marriage to Priscilla, while bringing him the joy of Lisa, Marie couldn't fill the void left by Eleanor, and the son he couldn't claim. He adored Lisa Marie, showering her with love and lavish gifts, trying to be the best father he could be, within the confines of his public life. Yet a part of his heart always yearned for the quiet, hidden life he had sacrificed. The updates from Mary, Eleanor's cousin, were his most cherished possessions. They came irregularly, often tucked into inconspicuous packages that arrived at Graceland addressed to Joe Esposito. Joe, who had become a trusted confidant and friend, would quietly deliver them to Elvis, never asking questions, always understanding the profound silence that followed. Sometimes it was a photo of Leo as a toddler, his dark eyes wide with curiosity, clutching a worn teddy bear. Then a few years later, a school picture showing a serious young boy with a thoughtful expression and a faint familiar curve to his smile. Later still, a snapshot of Leo, gangly and athletic, playing baseball with friends, his form strikingly reminiscent of Elvis's own youthful energy. Each picture was a revelation, a bittersweet glimpse into a life he was not a part of yet deeply connected to. He learned through Mary's letters that Leo was bright, a diligent student who loved reading and sketching. He was quiet, introspective, much like Eleanor, but also possessed an innate charisma, a spark that reminded Elvis of himself. Eleanor had instilled in him a love for nature, for simple pleasures, and a strong sense of self. She rarely spoke of herself, focusing instead on Leo's milestones, his triumphs, his little quirks. Elvis would spend hours looking at these photos, imagining conversations, first steps, birthday parties. He imagined what it would be like to teach Leo to play guitar, to throw baseball, to share his deepest thoughts. The pain wasn't regret for Lisa Marie, who was a light in his life, but a deep, poignant longing for the family he couldn't have. The son he couldn't publicly raise. He saw Leo's life unfold in his mind, a parallel existence, pristine and untouched by the chaos of his own world. The secret began to wear on him. It was a constant weight, a silent companion that followed him everywhere. It was in the longing in his voice when he sang certain ballads, the raw emotion that seemed to come from a well deeper than just performance. It was in the faraway look in his eyes during interviews, the moments of profound melancholy that no one could quite explain. He started pouring more of himself into his music, especially gospel. The spirituals, the hymns, offered a sanctuary for his aching soul. He found solace in their messages of redemption, of ultimate peace. He sang with a raw, undeniable sincerity, channeling his unexpressed emotions, his hidden sorrow into every note. Audiences might not have known the source of his pain, but they felt it responding to the palpable authenticity of his performances. Sometimes, late at night, fueled by pills and loneliness, he would dream of Eleanor. She would appear to him radiant and serene, holding Leo in her arms, her eyes filled with an unspoken understanding. He would wake with a start, the ache in his chest almost unbearable, the reality of his gilded cage pressing down on him. He knew Eleanor had made the right choice for Leo. He truly believed that. But believing it didn't lessen the emptiness, the yearning to be a visible part of his son's life. The secret was a constant, bittersweet reminder of the profound love that had bloomed in his secret garden. A love that continued to sustain him even as it broke his heart anew each day. Ghost of what might have been lingered, shaping his music, his performances, and the haunting pain behind his weary, famous eyes. As the 1970s progressed, Elvis's health began to decline. The demands of his career, coupled with his increasing reliance on prescription medication, took a visible toll. The sparkle in his eyes dimmed, replaced by a permanent weariness. Yet beneath the layers of fatigue and fame, his love for Leo remained a fiercely burning ember, untouched by the ravages of his public life. The occasional updates from Mary became even more precious. One year, a crude drawing arrived, a stick figure playing a guitar. Attached was a note. Leo started learning guitar this year. He has a good ear, just like his father. Elvis's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and profound sorrow. He imagined teaching Leo chords, showing him his favorite blues riffs, sharing the joy of music with his son. He longed to hear Leo's small hands strumming, to hear his voice even if off-key. Another time, Mary sent a program from a local school play. Leo's name was listed in a small role. Elvis stared at it for hours, imagining Leo on stage, feeling the tremor of nerves, the thrill of performance. He wondered if Leo had inherited his stage presence, his knack for captivating an audience, even in a small school auditorium. The thought was both exhilarating and agonizing. Pictured himself in the audience, a proud, anonymous father, watching his son shine. These glimpses into Leo's life were both a blessing and a curse. They kept the connection alive, nourished the love that transcended distance and secrecy, but they also sharpened the pain, reminding him of everything he was missing. He sometimes wondered if Leo ever asked about his father, if Eleanor had told him anything. Mary's letters were always careful to avoid such details. Maintaining the carefully constructed barrier, Elvis found himself increasingly introspective, turning to spiritual texts, searching for answers, for peace. He spent hours in prayer asking for strength, for guidance, for a way to reconcile the two halves of his life, the public icon and the private man yearning for his secret son. His music reflected this inner turmoil. He began to sing with even greater depth, infusing his performances with a raw vulnerability that resonated with his audiences. Songs like My Way became more than just a pop hit. For Elvis, it was a defiant declaration of a life lived on his own terms, yet also a lament for the choices he'd been forced to make. When he sang Always on My Mind, it was a silent promise to Leo. A testament to the fact that his son was, indeed, always in his thoughts, always in his heart. He often wondered what kind of man Leo was becoming. Was he happy? Was he truly free? He hoped Eleanor had given him a life filled with love, stability, and the freedom to be himself. He knew she had sacrificed much, too, to maintain their secret, to give their son the life she believed he deserved. His respect and love for her remained as strong as ever, a testament to the enduring bond forged in that secret garden. The pain behind his eyes deepened. With each passing year, a poignant reflection of his internal struggle. It wasn't the pain of regret, not truly. It was the pain of a love so profound, so pure, that it transcended all boundaries, even the barrier of a secret existence. It was the ache of an unfulfilled dream, a quiet longing for a future that could never be, for a father-son bond that could only exist in the shadows. He carried Leo's image in his heart, a constant reminder of the unseen legacy, the unseen love that defined the true depth of Elvis Presley's soul. It was 1976, a year before his death, when the longing became unbearable. Elvis, feeling increasingly isolated and unwell, made a desperate decision. He had to see Leo just once with his own eyes. Not to reveal himself, not to disrupt Leo's life, but simply to witness the young man his son had become. He meticulously planned the trip with Joe Esposito, swearing him to absolute secrecy. They traveled by private jet, then in an unmarked car to the remote Oregon town Mary had described in her letters. Elvis wore a heavy disguise, a hat pulled low, dark glasses, a fake beard, and clothes that were utterly un-Elvis. He was a ghost in his own life, moving silently through the world, hoping to catch a glimpse of the most important person he couldn't acknowledge. Mary, informed of Elvis's desperate need, had subtly guided them. She knew the rhythm of Leo's days. He was 15 now, almost a man. He attended the local high school, played basketball, and spent his afternoons sketching by the creek that ran behind the school. One crisp autumn afternoon, Elvis and Joe sat in a rented car parked discreetly a few blocks from the high school. Joe, though worried for Elvis's health and the emotional toll this would take, remained stoic and supportive. Then he saw him. Leo emerged from the school, his backpack slung over one shoulder, a basketball tucked under the other arm. He was tall, lean, with the easy grace of an athlete. His dark hair, almost black, fell across his forehead in a familiar wave. And as he laughed with a friend, that curve in his smile, just like Elvis had seen in the old photos, was unmistakable. Elvis's breath hitched in his throat. He felt a fierce surge of paternal pride, so intense it was almost unbearable. Leo looked happy, healthy, truly free. He wasn't weighed down by the constant demands of fame, by the expectations of millions. He was just a normal teenager living a normal life, just as Eleanor had wanted. He watched as Leo dribbled the ball, his movements fluid and natural. He saw the way Leo interacted with his friends, a quiet charisma evident in his easygoing manner. He watched as Leo paused by a patch of wildflowers, sketching quickly in a small notebook he pulled from his bag, a clear, artistic bent inherited from his mother. Tears, hot and silent, streamed down Elvis's face, hidden behind his dark glasses. This was his son, his beautiful, healthy, anonymous son. Pain behind his eyes was sharper now. a searing ache of love and loss. It was the pain of proximity without connection, of seeing everything he longed for, yet knowing he could never truly touch it. He imagined stepping out of the car, calling Leo's name. He imagined Leo's confusion, his questions, the shattering of the protective bubble Eleanor had so carefully built around him. He imagined the media frenzy that would inevitably follow, destroying Leo's peace, turning his life into a circus. He couldn't. He wouldn't. This was the ultimate act of love, the ultimate sacrifice, to watch from the shadows, to accept the role of the unseen father. He was Elvis Presley, the man who had everything, and yet he longed for this one thing more than anything else: a public life with his son. After an hour, Leo finally walked off, disappearing down a tree-lined street towards home. Elvis continued to stare at the empty spot where his son had been, the image seared into his memory. "Time to go, boss," Joe said softly, his voice full of sympathy. Elvis nodded, unable to speak. The visit had given him a profound sense of peace. Knowing Leo was well, but it had also deepened the raw wound in his heart. The pain was still there, but now it was also filled with a new, stronger current of love and pride. He understood now more than ever why Eleanor had made the choices she did. And he knew with a certainty that settled deep in his soul that every single moment of his enduring pain was worth it. For Leo's sake, Elvis Presley died on August 16, 1977. Headlines screamed, fans wept, and Graceland became a shrine. His public life, his music, his legacy were dissected, celebrated, and analyzed for decades to come. But the one secret that defined the true depth of his final years, the quiet pain behind his eyes, remained hidden. Eleanor Vance learned of his passing through a brief, discreet phone call from Joe Esposito. She had spent years preparing for this day, but the news still hit her with a profound, quiet grief. She mourned. Not just the king, but the man she had loved, the father of her child, the Eli who had found solace in her simple world. She held the small locket Elvis had given her, the one with her initials, and wept for the life they could never share. Leo, now 16, felt the tremors of the world's grief, but he didn't understand its personal significance. He saw the news reports, heard the songs, but Elvis Presley was just a legend, a distant figure in a world he didn't inhabit. It wasn't until several years later, after Leo had graduated high school and was preparing to leave for college, that Eleanor finally revealed the truth. She sat him down, her hands clasped in her lap, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and a deep, enduring love. She told him the story of Eli, the kind, soulful stranger who had found her in a quiet, mountain town. She spoke of their love, their shared dreams, and the impossible choice they had faced when she became pregnant. She showed him the letters from Mary, the tiny sketches, the photographs of him as a baby, all sent by his father. And then she showed him the worn photograph of a young, vibrant Elvis Presley, explaining that Eli was, in fact, the king. Leo listened, stunned, his world tilting on its axis. He looked at the photograph of his father, then at his own reflection in the window. He saw the familiar curve of the smile, the intensity in the eyes. He saw himself. A flood of emotions washed over him: disbelief, curiosity, and a profound, aching sense of connection to a man he had only known as a legend. "He's loved you, Leo," Eleanor whispered, tears streaming down her face. "More than words can say. He made the greatest sacrifice for you. He let you live a normal life, a free life, away from the chaos that was his world. He carried the pain of that separation every single day." Suddenly, the melancholic quality of Elvis's later songs, the haunting look in his eyes, in those concert films, the raw vulnerability in his voice, it all made sense to Leo. It wasn't just the weariness of fame. It was the burden of a secret love, a hidden child, a yearning for a life that could never be. His father's music became a bridge, a silent conversation across time and space, revealing the profound depth of his heart. Leo never sought out fame or public recognition. He honored his mother's choice and his father's sacrifice, choosing to live the quiet, artistic life they had given him. He became an accomplished painter, his canvases often filled with the serene landscapes of Oregon, but sometimes with abstract works that pulsed with a raw, almost musical energy, echoing the soul of his unseen father. Pain behind Elvis Presley's eyes in his final years wasn't a sign of defeat or bitterness. It was the enduring mark of a profound, secret love. A love for Eleanor, and an even deeper unspoken love for their son, Leo. It was the bittersweet ache of a father who willingly sacrificed his own happiness for his child's freedom, carrying that beautiful, heartbreaking secret to his grave. And in that ultimate act of love, Elvis Presley revealed not just the king, but the deeply human, infinitely loving heart of a man who gave his all.